I was standing at the edge of my sister's hospital room. They were all gathered around Emily's bed like she was a saint. My father smoothing her hair. My mother adjusting the sheets. Sarah had brought flowers. Even Josh was offering to fetch her ginger ale, and not one of them looked at me, except when they did to blame me for the fall before I tell you how I walked away and never looked back. Drop a comment to let me know where you're listening from and hit that subscribe button. If you've ever felt like the odd one out, the one nobody in the family really saw until they needed someone to blame, I'm Olivia Mitchell, middle daughter in a family that always looked like a magazine cover. We lived in a white colonial in a manicured suburb just outside Boston Flagpole, on the lawn, blue hydrangeas by the porch. Every room was color-coordinated for the local home tours, but behind that perfect door was a house where love came with conditions, and I was the one. No condition ever fit my Father Robert built his construction business from nothing and never let anyone forget it. He believed in order in appearances, in men who wore watches that gleamed under country club lights. My mother Diane gave up a crown for a ring and spent the rest of her life arranging napkins and daughters into displays of perfection. Sarah was the first straight-A's silky blonde hair married at 25 to a banker who called her darling in front of strangers. They had 2 kids who didn't spill juice. Every report card was framed, every recital front rowed. Emily came last. The baby 5 years younger than me and wrapped in soft sweaters and softer excuses. She knew how to cry just enough, how to pretend she didn't understand what she was doing. She got whatever she wanted, and if something went wrong, she simply pointed her finger at me. I learned early that my name was the one they whispered. When something broke when Sarah shattered Mom's vase at 5, I was the one sent to my room when Emily spilled red punch on Dad's white rug. I was the one who didn't watch her closely enough when Dad's blood pressure spiked. It was because I'd chosen psychology instead of something useful. I studied the very thing they accused me of being. Confusing too, emotional too distant. I earned a doctorate in family systems, wrote my dissertation on scapegoating dynamics, published in journals they never read, and not a single one came to my graduation. Not my father, not my mother, not either of my sisters, I told myself. It didn't matter that I was building a life, a career, a sense of self. But every time I went home, it chipped away again. Sarah's kids would run past me like I was a coat rack. Emily would make jokes at my expense, and my mother would ask if I had considered Spanx last summer at the lake house in New Hampshire. I brought Josh with me, the first man I'd ever let that far in. I thought maybe it would help to have someone by my side, someone who could see what I saw he did, but not soon enough. On the 3rd night, Emily leaned across the porch railing, laughing at everything. Josh said, touching his wrist, twisting her hair the way she always did. Her husband was 10 feet away, watching like a man who'd seen it all before. I pulled her aside in the kitchen, tried to say it gently. Emily, I saw what you were doing. I'd appreciate it if you backed off. She called for Mom before I could finish. Olivia thinks I'm stealing her boyfriend. And just like that, the story began writing itself. Without me, Dad told me to stop creating drama. Mom said I was always insecure. Sarah shook her head and smiled like she pitied me. I found Josh on the deck. He wrapped an arm around me, said, not to worry. But the next morning, when Emily cried from the bottom of the stairs saying I pushed her, and everyone rushed in, he stood by and said nothing. They all believed her, because they always had, and that's where this really begins. Scream came from the stairwell. I was in the sunroom, curled into the corner of a love seat, reading with the soft hush of the lake outside the window. I heard the thud before the voice. By the time I reached the front hall, Emily was already sprawled at the bottom of the stairs, crying out as she clutched her ankle. Her voice cracked the moment our eyes met. She pushed me, she sobbed, pointing at me with a trembling hand. Olivia pushed me down the stairs. I stood completely still. I hadn't even been near the staircase. Footsteps thundered in from all directions. My father knelt beside her, calling for someone to get ice. My mother grabbed throw pillows off the couch and started piling them behind Emily's back. Sarah pulled out her phone to call the hospital. No one looked at me. Not one person asked if it was true. What did you do? My father said sharply without even glancing up. I didn't do anything I said. I was in the sunroom. I heard her fall. "Stop lying," Sarah snapped. "You've been jealous of Emily since the day she was born. I wasn't anywhere near her. You've always had resentment issues," my mother added, standing behind my father with her arms folded tight across her chest. Josh came in, last confusion all over his face. "What's going on?" "She pushed Emily down the stairs," my mother said, like it was a settled fact. I turned to him. "You know I was in the sunroom. You were just there with me." He hesitated. "I stepped out to take a call. I didn't see anything. Emily was taken to the hospital. It was just a sprain, though the way she moaned you'd have thought she'd broken both legs." The whole family followed the ambulance surrounding her hospital bed like a royal court. I stood in the doorway. My father stroked her hair. My mother tucked the blanket under her chin. Sarah adjusted the lighting above the bed, fussing over shadows like it mattered. Josh brought her a bottle of water. "She's always been jealous," my father said, his voice raised just enough that the nurse in the hallway turned her head. "She needs serious help," my mother said quietly, shaking her head. I didn't move. Even Josh was nodding, now his hand resting on the foot of the bed. I watched him carefully. I'd known him 8 months. He had seen pieces of my family's pattern, but standing here, he was absorbing their version of the truth, like sunlight through glass. No one turned to me. No one asked what I saw or heard. No one asked where I'd been. I looked at each of them. My father's tense jaw, my mother's controlled expression, Sarah's performative concern, Emily's practiced tears, and Josh silent. It was like watching a play I'd seen 100 times. Every cue hit with perfect timing. The script never changed. Only now I was no longer reading for the part. I didn't say anything. I didn't cry or raise my voice. I walked out of the room. The hall was quiet. The hospital smell followed me out, bleach and vinyl, and the faintest trace of lemon-scented cleaner. My shoes clicked softly down the corridor. No one called after me. I didn't expect them to. On the drive back to the lake house, the sun was beginning to set. The trees on either side of the road cast long, stretching shadows. The water caught the light like glass. I rolled the window down halfway. The air was cool, filled with pine and lake and the faint scent of rain to come. When I pulled into the gravel driveway, the house was still empty. I parked around the back behind the hedges, just in case. Inside, everything was exactly as we'd left it that morning. A few glasses on the counter, a folded towel draped over the railing near the dock door. My room was the smallest one at the end of the hall, damp in the spring, always a musty smell when it rained. I pulled my suitcase from the closet. I didn't pack everything, just what I needed, my laptop, a few sweaters, my favorite books. I left the watch they gave me last Christmas, identical to the ones Sarah and Emily had gotten, except theirs had diamonds. Mine didn't. I left it on the dresser. I found the old diary when I was pulling sweaters from the top shelf. I hadn't seen it in years. The lock was still there. The key was taped to the bottom of the box, right where I'd hidden it at 16. I sat on the bed and opened it. The pages were full of handwriting. Careful, neat. I'd recorded dates, what was said, how it felt. Every entry was a quiet record of what I couldn't explain at the time. One entry caught my eye. April 18, 2007. Today was Sarah's graduation party. Mom was running around trying to make everything perfect. Emily knocked over the punch bowl. It went everywhere. She said I told her to carry it. I didn't. I was outside the whole time. Mom sent me to my room for the rest of the day. I heard everyone laughing downstairs. Dad came up and said I needed to stop ruining special occasions. I placed the diary in the suitcase. In the corner of the dresser was the emerald necklace Grandma Ellie had given me before she passed. My mother never liked that she'd left it to me. She thought it should have gone to Sarah. I stood there for a moment with it in my hand. Then I put it on. I left a note where the necklace had been. 5 words. Nothing more. I won't be your scapegoat. I walked through the rest of the house one last time. I didn't linger. I didn't look at the family photos on the wall. I didn't take anything from the kitchen or the hall closet. Just what I brought with me. Then I left. I didn't cry. The sky was darker now. The lake behind the house had turned steel gray. A summer storm was coming in from the west. I backed out slowly, the gravel crunching under the tires, and watched the house disappear in the rearview mirror. When I turned onto the main road, I didn't look back. I was halfway to Boston when I called Lauren. She didn't ask questions. "The guest room's ready," she said. "Just get here." I hung up and drove in silence. No music, no calls, only the sound of the wind through the crack in the window and the steady rhythm of the tires on the road. By the time I reached Lauren's front porch, the rain had started. Just a light drizzle at first clinging to my sleeves as I rang the bell. She opened the door in a cardigan and slippers, stepping aside so I could come in without a word. The hallway smelled like cinnamon tea and lavender. I set down my bag and took a long breath. She brought me a towel and led me to the guest room. The window overlooked a small community garden with crooked trellises and mismatched flower beds. I stood at the window for a while, watching a squirrel dart through the empty plots. The next morning, we sat at her kitchen table. She'd made oatmeal and coffee and didn't press me to speak. When I finally started talking, it wasn't about the lake house or Emily or even Josh. I told her about the diary, about the entries I'd forgotten I'd written, about the note I left on the dresser. Lauren listened without interrupting. She stirred her tea slowly, her eyes soft but steady. "I've been waiting years for you to take this step," she said, setting the spoon down. I didn't answer right away. I wasn't sure what came next. That week passed quietly. I sent a leave request to the department chair at the university. I emailed my landlord to let him know I wouldn't be renewing. I created a new email address, changed my phone number, and closed my old accounts. I didn't tell anyone from my family. There wasn't anyone to tell. Most of my time was spent in the guest room or walking the neighborhood. I picked up paperbacks from the corner bookstore. I sat on a park bench near a pond and watched ducks drift past one by one. Each day I went a little farther. By the fourth morning, I had a list of apartments to see in Portland. Lauren connected me with a therapist. Dr. May Chen had a quiet office above a bakery on Congress Street. The first session, she asked simple questions. My answers came out in pieces. Childhood memories, dinner tables, Christmas mornings, that final night at the hospital. "What you're describing," she said, "is a family system built on roles. And you were given one early." I nodded. "The scapegoat," she added gently. The word sat heavily, though I'd written about it, taught about it, published on it. But hearing it said aloud in this context in reference to me was different. I kept going. Twice a week. We unpacked years of moments that had once felt isolated, but now clearly belonged to a pattern. Dr. Chen helped me see the threads I hadn't named before, the subtle ones, the ones tied to money, appearance, shame. Some afternoons I returned to Lauren's and napped with the windows open. Other days I took long walks through unfamiliar streets, letting my feet choose the direction. Within 2 weeks I'd signed a short-term lease on a converted textile loft with brick walls and tall windows. It was smaller than my old place in Boston, but it felt like something that could belong to me. The day I moved in, I brought only 2 suitcases and a few boxes of books. I bought a second-hand couch and a kettle. I picked out curtains in a soft green that reminded me of pine needles. I painted the kitchen walls deep blue, something my mother would have called too dark. I adopted a cat from a shelter, a gray one with a crooked ear and a fondness for lying in sunbeams. I named him Einstein. He followed me from room to room like a shadow. Some decisions still took more energy than I expected. Picking out groceries, choosing a movie, deciding whether to call someone back. Dr. Chen reminded me that those moments weren't failures. They were chances to listen to what I wanted without fear of being blamed for the outcome. I took her words home and practiced. I made lasagna without anyone commenting on how many calories it had. I lit candles at night and read on the floor when I felt like it. I started writing again, small things at first. Notes, reflections, outlines. After a few weeks, I applied for a research role at a trauma institute in town. The director, Dr. Abigail Montgomery, had read some of my earlier work. She asked about my current interests. Resilience, I said, especially in adults recovering from family dysfunction. She offered me the position that same afternoon. I bought a coffee table from a local carpenter. It had scratches and uneven legs, but the wood was warm and worn in the right way. It reminded me of something that had lived a life already. May the woman in the apartment next door introduced herself with a plate of cookies and a joke about our leaky hallway light. She worked as a graphic designer and liked late-night dumpling experiments. We started having dinner once a week. No small talk. Just stories. Quiet laughter. Familiarity. "I don't know what you left behind," she said one night, "but you seem lighter now." I thought about that after she left. The weight I'd carried wasn't gone, but it was finally mine to set down. Still, there were moments when the silence stretched. No calls from my parents, no texts from Sarah, no emails. The absence was a confirmation of what I'd always suspected, that I had mattered to them most when I was useful as a mirror for their guilt. Dr. Chen called it system reorganization. They're recalibrating, she said. The system needs someone to carry the discomfort, and without you, they'll find someone else, I said. She nodded, or start seeing themselves more clearly, though not all at once. By the third week, I realized I'd gone an entire day without thinking about how my family might react to something I did. That night, I ordered takeout from a small Thai place down the block and ate it on the floor while watching a documentary about sea creatures. Einstein purred beside me, and the overhead light flickered softly. The apartment felt like mine. The next morning, I opened my laptop and began sketching a new research proposal. I titled the file Adult Survivors of the Scapegoat Role. Later that day, May stopped by with dumplings wrapped in wax paper. "You always have good stories," she said, sitting on the couch. "You should write them down." I looked at the open folder on my desk, then at the tea warming on the stove. I think I just might. Outside, the Portland streets were quiet. Somewhere, a neighbor's wind chime stirred in the breeze, and in the distance behind the clouds, the first edge of sunlight began to rise. 3 weeks after I left the lake house, my phone rang for the first time. The number wasn't familiar, but the area code was Boston. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again, twice more, all different numbers. I muted the ringer and turned the phone face down on the kitchen table. 20 minutes later, my email inbox filled with messages. Some were names I hadn't seen in years, distant cousins, old neighbors, even one from my mother's college roommate. None of them said what had happened. They just said it was urgent. I called Lauren. They found a way to contact me. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Are you going to answer them?" "I don't know. Part of me wants to know what's going on, but I don't want to get pulled back in. If you do respond," she said, "make sure it's from strength, not guilt." I printed the emails and brought them to my next session with Dr. Chen. She flipped through the pages, slowly making notes in the margins. "They all carry the same tone," she said, "urgent but vague. That's a pattern. It's often a way to bypass boundaries, create panic without offering clarity." She was right. Every message hinted at something without saying what. There was no explanation, just pressure. Then while we were talking, a new message came through. From Harriet Collins, a family friend. Someone who'd always been polite to me but never close. The subject line read, "The truth about what's happening with your family." Dr. Chen looked at me and gave a small nod. I opened it. Harriet had heard from someone at the hospital. A nurse had overheard Emily on the phone bragging that she'd convinced everyone I had pushed her. When questioned, she admitted the fall was staged. Her husband Tyler had filed for divorce. He cited manipulation and deception in the paperwork. Harriet went on. My father's business partner had pulled out of a major deal. Gerald Thompson, a man who rarely made public comments, had voiced concern about my father's judgment based on what he'd seen at the hospital. My mother had a breakdown at a charity meeting. She started shouting when someone asked about me. The committee chair asked her to step down temporarily. Sarah's marriage wasn't doing well. Her husband had moved into the guest room. Neighbors had seen him with a younger colleague, and the biggest shift of all, they were turning on each other. My father blamed my mother for coddling Emily. My mother blamed Sarah for setting impossible standards. Sarah blamed them both for how things were unraveling. Emily blamed everyone but herself. I read the message twice. I didn't feel triumphant. But something inside me settled. "They're unraveling without a scapegoat," I said quietly. Dr. Chen nodded. "The system is exposed." That evening, the voicemails came in waves. My father's voice was sharp. "This has gone on long enough. Your behavior is affecting the family. We need you to come back and fix this." My mother's was softer, but no less pointed. "Olivia, I don't know what's gotten into you, but we need to talk. People are asking questions. I don't know what to tell them." Then an email from Sarah, the first time she'd ever acknowledged anything. "Liv, I know we've never been close. That's probably my fault. Since you left, I've been noticing things, patterns I didn't see before. I'm not saying Mom and Dad were right, but maybe I should have been a better sister. The family's falling apart without you. I know that's not your problem. But would you come home for a family meeting? We need to figure this out. You always understood this stuff better than the rest of us. Even in her attempt to reach out, the request was familiar. She wanted me back in the role. The fixer, the quiet interpreter. Emily didn't write or call. Later that night, another name showed up in my inbox. Dr. Robert Marcus, a therapist my family had seen briefly when I was a teenager. Dear Olivia, I hope you remember me. Your family only attended a few sessions, but I've thought of you often. Your parents have recently reached out asking for another round of family therapy focused supposedly on supporting you. But it's clear the system is struggling to operate without its designated scapegoat. I recognized your role then. I tried to name it. That's likely why the sessions ended so abruptly. Whatever you're doing to establish boundaries, it's courageous. If you'd like a referral in your area, I'd be glad to help. Sincerely, Dr. Marcus. The message stayed open on my screen for a long time. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I just felt something solid form in my chest, something steady. At my next session, I told Dr. Chen about the messages, the emails, the voices from the past pulling at the thread. I feel guilty, I said, not for leaving, but for not feeling worse about what they're going through. That's not guilt, she said. That's programming. You've spent your life measuring your peace against their discomfort. That's the part you're healing. I asked her whether I should respond to any of them. What serves your healing, she asked, not what would be expected, not what would calm them down, what would help you continue your path. I sat with the question for days. Then a package arrived. A small box, return address Northampton, Massachusetts. Inside were several old journals, a letter, and a wooden box with a name card. The letter was handwritten. Dear Olivia, you don't know me, but I was Eleanor's friend for over 50 years. Before she passed, she asked me to send you these if the time ever came. She said, if Olivia finds the strength to leave, she'll need to know she wasn't alone. When I heard what happened, I knew this was that moment. The journals are Eleanor's. They'll explain everything. She loved you dearly. With care, Margaret Winters. The journals were old but well kept. Inside were notes, observations, and memories, some from before I was born. My grandmother had written down her concerns. From the day I turned 2, she noticed how my mother reacted to me, how my father reinforced the pattern. She tried to step in, tried to challenge it, and slowly she was pushed out. One entry read, May 12, 1995. Diane scolded Olivia for taking a toy that Sarah had long discarded. It was nothing, but the reaction was sharp. I tried to intervene. Richard told me I was undermining their authority. Another November 18, 2000. Emily threw a ball inside and broke a window. Olivia was blamed again. I said something. I was told I was creating division. And then, from 2008, I've set up a trust. It won't be shared equally, and I know that will upset them. But Olivia will need freedom someday. I hope this gives her a way out. At the bottom of the package was a second letter. From a lawyer, Jonathan Weiss. The trust had been created for me alone, activated upon turning 25 or completing graduate studies. I was 29. It had been available for years. I looked at the final envelope. Inside was a small stack of photos. My grandmother at my high school graduation, sitting in the back row, watching from the sidelines. She'd been there all along. The wooden box contained one last thing. A letter with her handwriting on the front, dated 2 weeks before she passed. My dearest Olivia, if you're reading this, you found your strength. I always knew you would. You were never the problem. You were simply the one who saw clearly. That scares people who build their world on denial. The money is yours. But the real gift is the truth. You were never alone. With all my love, Grandma Ellie. I sat on the floor with Einstein curled beside me. The light outside had turned amber. The journals, letters, and photos lay around me in quiet circles. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had left something behind. I felt like I had arrived somewhere I was always meant to be. After verifying the trust and working with Jonathan Weiss to finalize the transfer, the funds moved into my account quietly. There was no ceremony, no dramatic moment, just a line of numbers on a screen, stable and real. I didn't make any big purchases that week. No sudden shifts. But everything felt different. I breathed easier. I stood taller in the grocery line. The options in front of me expanded not just in my budget, but in my imagination. Dr. Chen and I talked about what that kind of financial independence could mean. Not just freedom from debt, but from obligation. From dependence on people who use support as control. I used a portion for a down payment on a small bungalow in Portland. One story, covered front porch, old wood floors, and a garden that needed work. The place wasn't fancy, but it felt like something that could hold peace. While I waited for the closing date, I kept reading my grandmother's journals. I found more entries about my childhood, about holidays, about quiet interventions she tried that were ignored or redirected. And then, tucked inside one of the later notebooks, I found a paperclip holding 2 yellowed bank statements and a handwritten list. It was a college fund, set up by my paternal grandparents for each grandchild. Sarah and Emily had received their shares. I hadn't. I remembered what my parents told me back then: there wasn't enough left. I would need to take out loans. I did, and carried that debt for years. I brought the documents to a lawyer in town, Elise Wren. She reviewed them carefully, comparing dates and signatures. "You have a case," she said, "but the emotional cost may outweigh the financial recovery." I nodded. I'd already guessed as much. I decided not to file anything. I wasn't letting them keep it. I was letting myself go. Back home, I made a list of what I wanted to do next. Not the obligations, not the damage control, just what mattered to me. The first was to accept the full-time offer from the Trauma Research Institute. Dr. Montgomery had been patient, never pushing me. She gave me time to decide. When I accepted, she responded within the hour. "Welcome," she wrote. "Your work is going to help a lot of people." I started drafting my new research proposal, Resilience and Recovery in Adult Survivors of Family Scapegoating. It would be grounded in both data and experience. I kept my grandmother's notes nearby while I worked. Next, I wrote to Margaret Winters. "Dear Margaret, thank you for sending the journals, for keeping them safe, for remembering me when it mattered. Reading what my grandmother saw and knowing she left something behind for me has shifted something inside me. I finally believe I wasn't imagining it. Her efforts weren't wasted. They gave me a kind of compass. I would love to meet you when the time is right. With deep gratitude, Olivia." I mailed the letter from the small post office 2 blocks from my apartment. Then I stopped at the cafe nearby for a cup of tea. The woman behind the counter asked if I wanted to start a loyalty card. I said yes. Each week I added something small to the new house: a reading chair, a soft rug for the bedroom, a bookshelf made by hand from reclaimed wood. I planted lavender by the back door and put wind chimes above the kitchen window. May helped me paint the living room one Saturday. We played music while we worked, laughing about the uneven roller marks and the color that looked more blue than it had in the sample. "This place already feels like you," she said, stretching her arms over her head. I looked around. It really did. I began volunteering with a local mentorship program for teens. Once a week, I met with girls navigating complicated home lives. Some were living with relatives. Others had bounced through foster care. One girl, Zoe, was 14. She barely spoke the first 2 sessions, but by the third, she looked me in the eye and asked if I'd be back next week. "I will," I said, "every Thursday." At home, I kept Einstein's food bowl full and his favorite blanket on the corner of the couch. He followed me from room to room, content just to be near. I spoke with Dr. Chen about what it meant to live without waiting for approval, about how unfamiliar it felt not to brace for criticism or dismissal. That space, she said, is where identity forms. I let that sit with me for a while. As the weeks passed, the messages from my family slowed. Eventually, they stopped entirely. No calls, no updates, no more pressure. But in the quiet, something new arrived. A letter from Rebecca Mitchell Cohen. She was a second cousin on my father's side. We'd met once years ago at a wedding. I barely remembered her face. "Dear Olivia, I've been following your research. I'm a school counselor now, and your paper on adult children from dysfunctional families landed on my desk. It hit too close, not just for my students, for me. I didn't know anyone else in the family who ever questioned the way things were, until now. I wonder how far this pattern runs. If you're open to it, I'd like to talk." Respectfully, Rebecca. I folded the letter twice and placed it inside my notebook. The possibility of connection, not through performance or obligation, but shared understanding, felt like something new. As I worked on the outline for a future group therapy model, I thought about what my grandmother wrote, that the pattern passes through generations unless someone stops it, that the one who breaks it isn't broken. Outside, the first frost had dusted the leaves along the street. I pulled a quilt over my lap and opened my laptop. I was no longer trying to prove anything. I was just living in the truth. It was a Saturday morning in early October. I was planting tulip bulbs in the front garden when the black SUV pulled to the curb. Even before the doors opened, I knew who it was. My father stepped out first, still wearing his usual blazer even in the weekend chill. My mother followed, a silk scarf tied tightly at her neck. Sarah climbed out last. Her arms crossed her eyes, searching the porch. Emily wasn't with them. I stood slowly, brushing the dirt from my hands. The garden trowel was still tucked in my palm. Olivia, my father called, walking toward me. "This has gone on long enough. It's time to come home." I glanced across the street. My neighbors were out with their kids raking leaves. I didn't want this conversation in my yard. "We can talk," I said, "but not here. There's a cafe 2 blocks over. We'll meet in 1 hour." My mother frowned. "You're being dramatic. We're your family. We don't need strangers listening in." "I'm bringing someone with me," I said calmly. "That's the condition." My father's mouth tightened. "Now listen." "No," I said louder than I meant to. "Those are my terms. Take them or leave them." I walked back inside and closed the door behind me. My hands shook as I dialed Dr. Chen. She didn't hesitate. "I'll meet you there," she said. "You won't be alone." At 2 o'clock, we sat at a small table by the window at Riverbank Cafe. Dr. Chen ordered chamomile tea. I didn't touch my coffee. They arrived exactly on time. Punctuality had always been one of my father's rules. As they approached, I saw the way their eyes darted toward Dr. Chen. They were trying to gauge what I'd told her, trying to adjust the performance. My mother reached for my hand the moment she sat down. I moved it gently away. "We've been so worried," she began. "To disappear like that without a word?" "I left a note," I said. It was clear. "I won't be your scapegoat anymore," my father repeated with a scoff. "That's not a message. That's a tantrum." Dr. Chen spoke for the first time. "It sounds like Olivia was setting a boundary. With all due respect," my father said, "you're only hearing one side." "That's why I'm here," she said, "to observe the dynamic." Sarah spoke next. "Liv, I get that you needed space, but cutting everyone off, no calls, no messages, it was cruel." I reached into my bag and placed the diary on the table. "This is what I've carried. From the age of 8, I'd like to read a few entries." Before they could respond, I opened to a marked page. December 25th, 2006, Christmas Day. Sarah broke the angel ornament while reaching for her stocking. She told Mom I knocked it over. I wasn't even in the room. I got sent to my room. Dad said I ruined Christmas again. I turned the page. April 30th, 2009. Emily took my school project and returned it with pages missing. I showed Mom. She said I should have hidden it better. I got an F. Dad grounded me. Emily never said a word. I looked up. My mother's face had gone pale. My father's jaw was tight. Sarah shifted in her seat. One more entry. July 18th, 2010. Dad yelled at me for an hour because the garage door was left open. Emily later admitted she was the last one to use it. She laughed, said there was no point telling him it's always me anyway. I closed the diary. For years I wrote it all down, thinking maybe someday someone would believe me. I see now that was never going to happen. My father leaned forward. Childhood diaries. "Really? You've always been overly sensitive." Dr. Chen's tone didn't change. That response invalidating Olivia's experience seems consistent. "Everyone feels misunderstood as a child," my mother added. "That may be true," Dr. Chen said, "but dismissing someone's pain as sensitivity is part of the problem." My father's voice hardened. "We didn't come here for therapy. We came to bring Olivia home." "I'm not coming home," I said. "This is your home now?" my mother asked, looking around the cafe with thinly veiled disdain. I have a house, I said, and a life. And I've learned some things recently. I pulled out the letter from Jonathan Weiss. Did you know about Grandma Ellie's trust? The one she left for me. The pause told me everything I needed to know. You did. My mother's lips pressed into a tight line. That money should have been divided equally, she said. She always favored you. It was her money, I said. She saw what was happening. She tried to protect me. Sarah blinked. You had a trust fund and a college fund. But they told me the money was gone. I took out loans, paid my way. My father tried to speak, but his words stumbled. That's not... I've spoken to the attorneys. I have documentation. For the first time, Sarah didn't look sure of her place at the table. Her gaze moved from our parents to me and back again. You took out loans, she said softly. All those years. My father straightened. Enough of this. You have a choice, Olivia. Come back with us now and we'll move forward. Or keep going down this path and consider yourself cut off. Dr. Chen leaned forward slightly. That sounds like a false choice. There are many ways to define family. My father ignored her. Well, he said, are you still a Mitchell or not? I met his eyes. I haven't been part of a real family in years. What I've been is convenient, a target, a placeholder. I'm not rejecting family. I'm rejecting dysfunction. My mother began to cry, but it wasn't grief, it was something else. I knew those tears. They came with strings. How can you say such cruel things, she whispered, after everything we've done for you? I stayed quiet. You criticized me, I said finally. You blamed me, lied to me, kept me from the one person who actually loved me for who I was. Tell me what part of that I should be thankful for. My father stood abruptly. We're done here. Come on, Martha. Sarah stayed seated a moment longer. I don't know what to think, she said. You don't have to decide today, I told her. If you ever want to talk without their version of the story, I'm here. Outside the window, I watched them walk to the SUV. My father opened the door for my mother. Sarah followed slowly behind. Dr. Chen rested a hand on my shoulder. How are you feeling? I looked down at the diary still on the table. Free, I said. We stood to leave. At the counter, the young woman who'd served our tea gave me a quiet smile. You were brave, she said. I nodded, thanked her, and walked out into the autumn air. That night, my phone rang once more. A new number. Olivia. The voice was quiet. It was Emily. Emily's voice on the phone was quiet, almost unsure. For a moment, I thought she might hang up before saying anything more. Sarah gave me your number, she said. I didn't come with them to the cafe. I couldn't. I didn't respond. I waited. I wanted to say I know what I did, she continued. At the lake house. And before that, all of it. The silence stretched between us. I've started therapy, she added. After Tyler left, I didn't know what to do. And then when you left too, I had to take a long look at who I've been. I leaned against the kitchen counter, staring out the window at the dusk falling across the street. I'm not calling to ask for forgiveness, she said. I don't expect it. I just wanted you to know you were right to leave. Someone in this family had to tell the truth. That call didn't solve everything, but it did something. It opened a door that had always been closed. We didn't talk again for a while. A few weeks passed. Leaves gathered along the edges of the sidewalk. The first frost crept over my back porch. Then one afternoon, I got a text from her. Would you be open to a call sometime next week? No pressure. I said yes. She called that Friday. This time, her voice was steadier. I've moved out, she told me. I'm staying in a small place across town. I'm not seeing anyone. Just working and trying to figure out who I am when no one's watching. I didn't say much. I just listened. Each time we talked, she told me something new. Sometimes it was small, a memory, a moment she'd never apologized for. Other times, it was deeper. My therapist says I was the golden child, she said one day, and that it's a role, not a reward. I didn't know that before. We started talking once a month, never for long, but always honest. Meanwhile, I kept writing. The research proposal grew into a manuscript. Dr. Montgomery invited me to present early findings at a conference in Boston, the same city I had left just months earlier. I hesitated, but eventually I accepted. "Your voice belongs in that room," she said when I told her. The morning of the conference, I took the train in. I stayed in a small hotel near the harbor. I walked through the same streets I once avoided. They didn't feel the same anymore. That evening, I stood at a podium in front of 200 professionals, therapists, educators, researchers. My voice didn't shake. After the session, a woman approached me. She wore a name tag that read Rebecca Cohen. She was the cousin who had written me. "I'm glad you came," she said, and I meant what I wrote. "The pattern's not just in your branch of the family." We sat in the corner of the lobby for nearly 2 hours talking quietly over coffee. She shared stories, things she had never said aloud before. "Reading your work gave me language for something I couldn't name," she said. The next day, I rode back to Portland with a new idea forming, a space for people like us, a network, not just research, but connection, support, a way forward. That weekend I brought the idea to Dr. Chen. "Many of us walk away from family, but have nowhere to walk to," I said. She nodded. "And yet healing begins with naming the truth in community." We brainstormed over tea in her office. I started drafting a concept in online resource support groups education for therapists unfamiliar with scapegoat trauma. I named it the Eleanor Network, in honor of the woman who saw me when no one else did. My home by now had grown into a place of comfort. The lavender I planted had taken root. The wind chimes sang softly each morning. Einstein curled in the same patch of sunlight near the couch. May remained a constant presence, so did Lauren. Rebecca and I started emailing weekly. Emily and I met in person for the first time since the hospital. We walked by the river. No big conversation, just a quiet stroll side by side. "I was cruel to you," she said finally. "I can't take it back." "You're trying," I said. "That's what matters now." She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. Later that evening, as I set the kettle on, a letter arrived. It was formal, my parents' attorney. Inside a single typed page, they would welcome me back into the family upon a sincere apology and a return to open communication and mutual respect. I placed it in the drawer beside the others, not out of spite, just to remind myself of the line I had drawn. They still hadn't changed, and I didn't need them to. I had created something new. 6 months after I walked away, life had finally grown quiet in the ways I'd always longed for. My home with its garden and sunlight felt like mine for the first time. The lavender bloomed along the walkway, and Einstein found his favorite patch by the window each morning. The pain that used to settle in my chest whenever the phone rang had faded. In its place was a soft, steady sense of belonging, not to a family name, but to my own life. Emily and I still spoke always carefully, sometimes with long pauses. She never asked for forgiveness, and I never forced her to revisit the past. Our calls were about the present now, recipes, work, the first snowfall that blanketed her apartment building. Once she sent a photo of her new houseplant. "Keeping this one alive," she wrote, "trying to do better." I replied with a picture of Einstein tangled in a ball of yarn. No words were needed. Rebecca and I launched the Eleanor Network that spring. The response was quiet but real. People wrote from across the country, a school counselor in Michigan, a retired nurse from Georgia, a college student in Nevada, each with their own version of the story I'd carried. For the first time, I saw how many of us had broken old patterns, choosing dignity and truth, even when it meant walking away from those who could not change. May and Lauren remained steady anchors. They came over on Sundays to help in the garden or linger at the kitchen table. We shared meals, laughter, and stories that had nothing to do with pain. These gatherings became the family holidays I had imagined as a child, only now they were real. My parents never called again. Sarah sent a birthday card in the spring. The message inside was brief: "Hope you're well. Sarah." I read it twice, then set it aside with the rest of the unopened letters. Dr. Chen asked me once if I'd found peace. I thought about it as I watched the daffodils nodding in the wind outside her office. Peace, I realized, wasn't the absence of pain. It was learning to tend my own garden, to notice joy, and to let old wounds finally close. If you've listened this far, maybe you've carried a story like mine. Maybe you know how hard it is to walk away or how brave you have to be to stay true to yourself. I hope you find people who see you just as you are. Family isn't about blood or obligation. It's about kindness, respect, and showing up when it matters. Thank you for sitting with me through this journey. If any part of it has touched your own life, I'd love to hear from you. Take care of your heart, and remember you are worthy of love and peace just as you are.